Hello, welcome to Back to School Night. Sorry I couldn't make it, but I figured everybody would definitely appreciate a little bit of info. Uh, today, this is for the Bio of the Living Earth. This class is a combination of just kind of your regular biology and then basing off of Earth science phenomena. So we start off with ecosystems, interaction, energy, kind of ecology. How do we transfer energy throughout the different ecosystems? Talk about trophic levels, where our energy comes from, those sorts of things. Then we move to the history of the Earth's atmosphere. Goes right along back with that ecosystem interaction. Gives ourselves a chance to talk about the greenhouse effect, how life started, what was necessary in the atmosphere, in the oceans for the start of life. Then we use some of that background knowledge to help us out understand evidence for evolution, talk about evolutionary mechanisms, how we got from single-celled organisms to what we are now, what's living on Earth now. We also combine that with the inheritance of traits and genes, genetics, understanding how those are transferred from one generation to the other, which then reinforces a lot of those ideas of evolution. And then how do those genes actually get expressed? So we talk about the genes, what we see kind of at, the macro level, what we see, and then how does that actually get coded for and expressed in our DNA, right? And then we go back, kind of wrap everything up, go back to our ecosystems, back to how have humans impacted our ecosystems, and talk about all of those things. All right, so just so you know, this is probably your last required science at Del Campo. So freshman year, they took physics of the universe. Second year, they took chemistry of Earth systems. And then now we are taking our life science. So they needed 3 sciences. One had to be a life lab science. One had to be a physical life science. This is that lab life science. All right, so things that they need: an interactive notebook. Most students have that. It's an 8.5 by 11-inch notebook, has about 100 sheets in it. We'll use a calculator from time to time, a pencil sharpener for their pencils, or if they have mechanical pencils. Definitely need glue for building our interactive notebooks. This one can't be understated enough. We need Post-its because we're going to add repetitions to our notes, and this allows you to go back and add those things to notes. Our red, blue, green highlighters will be used all the time for, again, adding repetitions, coloring, adding illustrations, those sorts of things. So the normal school supplies, say the most important, are going to be the glue, the Post-its, and the highlighters. All right, in this class, everything's out of 5 points. Many things, I will say, kind of the max score is a 4. Like, for example, we did getting your syllabus signed. You can't be super duper awesome at getting your syllabus signed. Like, the max is 4. And because of that, the grading scale is changed in Google Classroom. It's not a big deal. You can ask me about that personally, but it's adjusted so if you're getting 4s most of the time and every now and then you get a 5, you're going to end up with an A in the class. And I'll go a little bit more into how we get the grades. Most of the class is not an averaging of your score. All right, we follow what's called 5-point grading scale. And so if you're meeting the standards, that's what I expect you to do. That's a 4. So doing what you're supposed to is a 4. Going above and beyond, showing that super understanding, that's a 5. And so we'll use this score, we'll use this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on tests, projects, everything. So everything's going to be out of 5. But remember, sometimes a 4 is going to be the max that they're going to get, so don't be freaking out. All right. Grading for equity, that's the model that we use. I'll leave this up here for just a second. You can pause it if you want. But the idea is to not punish students for when they struggle, allow them to grow, and promote that idea that you can move anywhere. So as you are learning, the idea is you might not be as good, and you probably won't be as good at the beginning. And towards the end, as you get practice, you should improve. So things like quizzes, they'll go into the grade book, but they're not going to have the impact that a unit test, a project that shows learning, those sorts of things. Your homework, we're going to score and give feedback on, but that's not really what's going to have a big impact on the grade. At the very beginning of class, it will, but as soon as we have that first unit project, unit exam, that's what's really going to show their learning. So not only that, that kind of puts a little bit of pressure on the summative exam or the project, like I keep mentioning. And so we don't want that to be the only way that you show your understanding. That's the way we'll kind of give to everybody, but we'll also give options for how do I improve that and change that. One option will be just to wait a little, do some more practice, and the next time we have a big unit exam, you retake that portion and show improvement. I'll talk about different ways as well as that. So that different way could be like showing a mental model. Maybe you pick a question that's on our targets that you want to answer and show your understanding, show those connections. Maybe you want to do some sort of research project. All of these are options, and you can use those in place of the typical grade. So our final exam, same sort of thing that I mentioned before. This is going to be your last opportunity to show your understanding. So at the beginning, in Unit A, you didn't do so well. Let's say you got a D. Well, on the final exam, you'll be able to take a similar version of Unit A as well as your Unit B and Unit C. And by redoing Unit A, if you go from a D to an A on that part, that's the score you're going to get on that. And we'll forget about the first one because, heck, that shows that you learn, and that's exactly what you want. So we'll look at each unit individually and develop a score, a grade off of how you've improved. Since we are trying to promote that idea of growth, we will definitely accept late work. Now, just personally, I tend to grade things all at one time, and if you don't turn it in and you turn it in late, it's probably going to take some nagging from the student, from the parent. That's appreciated. I need a little reminder to go back and enter in those old things. That's kind of the penalty of turning in some late. You're not going to get the same sort of feedback as quick. And also with that, unless it's a summative that you missed, missing that little assignment and turning it late, not going to really affect your overall grade. The things that affect your grade are those big unit projects, tests, that sort of thing. And again, we're focusing on you want to do the practice because it's practice, not because you're collecting points. And so we're trying to teach kind of that time management, that the student's learning, all right, I need to practice this. I'll make sure I'll do this to my best ability. I'll do all the practice. Or something happens one night, maybe a soccer game went too late, you get home at 10 and you're like, I've got 30 minutes to do some more homework. What am I going to do? The thing that's going to affect my grade the most, or this little reading that I can do later? And kind of promote that this is for practice, not for me collecting points, so I'm going to be able to manage my time. And so when we're looking at two students, let's pretend that we're doing 90, 80, 70, so 90 is an A, 80 is a B, 70 is a C, and so on, just kind of your typical. If we're looking at these two students, when we're talking about the typical point collecting guide, usually the student that's got an average of 76 would get a C. And down here, the student would have an average of 59. But when we look at their tests, this student isn't showing they're learning through tests. They're showing that they're able to complete classwork. And typically you get help with completing classwork and homework. This student is showing competency in their tests, and they're showing that they're not completing classwork. Well, I'm going to score this person as a higher. I would give this person a B and this person an F. And now, I know I was concerned. I didn't learn how to take typical tests very well until like my junior year of high school. That was where I really started to figure out, but some people take longer, or some people never figure out that typical multiple choice idea. So, like I said, you can do an alternate assignment. And I give those options every test, a different way of doing it. So you can show your information, your understanding a different way. All right, so again, this idea of grading for equity supports that growth mindset that I realize that at the beginning, you're not going to be as good as you're at the end. And that's the scientific process, that you're going to get more information. Things will make more sense, and we really want to promote that. So Q, I'll have mostly just summative scores. I will put in some other scores in there. You'll see those, and that's just going to be for you to say, oh, they're not doing some work. That's maybe why they aren't doing as well as on their tests. It's important to redo those critical assignments to give yourself that best opportunity for showing your understanding. And again, some examples: lab practicals, unit tests, projects, that sort of stuff. This is another example of, hey, somebody took the guiding questions and related them to our targets, our learning objectives, and they made a presentation, they put a little video together, and they talked about their understanding. And they did that instead of a typical test. All right? Here's, like I said, we give rubrics so that the students know what they're looking for. This is just I forget which project this is, but they'll have access to this on Google Classroom. And so they know what they're shooting for. They have their targets, so they know, how am I going to meet the standard? How do I show that I exceed standards? That sort of thing. And we also feel this grading model doesn't punish for just behavioral things. It's assessing their learning and their understanding, and that's what's really important. And that if they don't get it the first time, they can persevere, work hard, and reward that behavior and see, wow, with the right behaviors, I can improve my learning, not that I'm being assessed on my behaviors. And I figured probably a good thing to show you Google Classroom, so let me pause and get that real quick. So I recommend you should know your students' login so you can get into Google Classroom. I don't think the parent portal really works justly. So when you go to their Google Classroom and click on their period, a lot of times the feed pops up and you'll see things, but it's just a lot of stuff. I really recommend going to the classwork, where it'll be a lot more organized, and you'll see kind of what's on up top is the very most recent what happened, but then I have it organized into the different units, and what's on top is the most recent there. If you click on them, it will give you usually links. So for this right now, we're finishing up this lecture, and then I also have a screencast, so if they miss, they can go see that lecture. Most of our lectures will be like this because of COVID. We took some time to make some of those, so we're able to reuse some of that information. Also, you go down to class resources, and there's the daily agenda. This would be actually a really good place for you to check out, and the daily agenda is going to show at top kind of what's happening each day, what their work is as far as classwork, homework. Kind of, this is a good question you could ask them for just, hey, what'd you do today? Right? And then, like I mentioned before, the notebook is super important. We have a table of contents linked as well, and this will go, hey, what's on each page? Just make sure to click on item so you have the order. Mr. Mimio and I both have really close. Probably a lot of these are exactly the same, but we do differ from time to time. So it gives you each assignment what page it should be in their notebook. Appreciate that. Please feel free to send me emails anytime, and hope we have a good semester together. Thank you.